Governments everywhere are being asked to do something that sounds almost impossible: modernize public services with digital tools, rebuild trust with citizens, spend less while delivering more, and still tackle the big, tangled challenges of our time: climate adaptation, inequality, polarization, pandemic preparedness. And the uncomfortable truth is that the classic bureaucracy model, built for stability and consistency, just isn't designed for that kind of complexity. So today, let's talk about an idea that's showing up more and more in public administration research and real-world government innovation: polymathic leadership. Not in everyone must be a genius in everything sense, but in a very practical, modern way: leaders who can connect disciplines, translate between specialists, and integrate technology, policy, and human realities into one coherent approach. Think about a city leader trying to reduce homelessness. This isn't only a housing issue. It touches mental health systems, addiction services, public safety, zoning, employment programs, data about who is being served and who isn't, and the reality of budgets that are already stretched. Or picture someone running a national digital services team. They have to understand cybersecurity and user experience, legacy IT and procurement rules, political expectations, and frontline staff workflows. If you lead from just one lane, policy only, or tech only, or operations only, you will almost certainly miss something expensive and painful later. That is the gap polymathic leadership tries to close. The core idea is integrative breadth, knowing enough across multiple domains to spot patterns, ask sharper questions, recognize blind spots, and help specialists work together. It's not about becoming an encyclopedia. It's about being a strong connector and synthesizer in an environment where problems don't respect organizational charts. In government contexts, polymathic leadership usually shows up in four connected capabilities. First, cross-domain knowledge integration. A polymathic public leader can move between policy logic and software logic, between budgeting and behavioral insights, between stakeholder engagement and data. Not shallow familiarity, working literacy. Enough depth to know what good looks like, enough understanding to challenge assumptions, and enough credibility to bring experts into the same room and keep them aligned. Second, systems thinking and navigating complexity. Many public problems behave like complex adaptive systems. You do one thing and something else shifts. An intervention can create second-order effects, and those effects can loop back to change the original problem. Housing policy affects education outcomes. Transportation choices shape economic mobility. Health policy influences workforce productivity. Leaders who can map those relationships, anticipate ripple effects, and design with feedback loops in mind tend to outperform leaders who treat issues as isolated projects. Third, technology-human integration. Digital transformation is not just installing a platform or moving to the cloud. It's about how citizens actually experience services, how staff adopt or resist new workflows, how equity is affected, and how regulations enable or block change. If leadership treats transformation as purely technical, you often get tools people can't use or don't trust. If leadership treats it as purely human and political, you get stalled modernization and continued service failures. The effective approach bridges both. Fourth, stakeholder translation and coalition building. Government is full of different professional languages: elected officials, community advocates, procurement teams, designers, engineers, policy analysts, frontline workers. Polymathic leaders act as translators and coalition builders. They can hold multiple perspectives at once, make trade-offs visible, and keep everyone moving toward a shared goal without erasing legitimate differences. Why is this suddenly so urgent? A few forces are converging at the same time. One is the sheer pace of technological change. Private sector organizations adopted cloud computing, agile ways of working, user-centered design, and advanced analytics quickly. Many public agencies have been slowed by legacy systems, rigid procurement, and leadership structures that separate tech people from policy people from operations people. That separation creates a costly capability gap. Another is the explosion of what researchers call wicked problems, issues with deep interdependencies, uncertainty, and conflicting stakeholder values. Climate resilience, inequality, and public health preparedness are classic examples. You don't solve these problems with one department and a linear plan. You navigate them, adapt, and learn continuously. That requires leaders who can integrate technical, social, economic, and political dimensions at once. Then there's trust. In many countries, citizens are less likely to give institutions the benefit of the doubt. The old model of decide, announce, defend doesn't land the way it used to. People expect transparency, participation, and responsiveness. That creates a leadership requirement. Combine expertise with real engagement skills and an ability to incorporate feedback into how services and policies evolve. And finally, fiscal pressure. When budgets tighten, the instinct can be to cut. But the real challenge is redesign, finding new ways to deliver value. That often happens at the intersection of process improvement, technology enablement, workforce capability, and smarter policy design. Again, it's integrative work. When governments do develop polymathic leadership, the payoff can be enormous. You can see it in high-performing examples. Estonia moving nearly all public services online required leadership that aligned technology, legal change, and citizen trust. Singapore's Smart Nation efforts brought together urban planning, data governance, and behavioral insights. On the other side, many high-profile failures trace back to integration breakdowns. Technical and organizational realities didn't match, human experience wasn't designed in, or cross-agency coordination collapsed under pressure. So what improves when polymathic leadership is present? Internally, one big advantage is better policy outcomes and service delivery. Teams that combine disciplines, and are led by people who can integrate those disciplines, tend to build solutions that actually work in practice. Leaders who understand both policy intent and implementation constraints avoid designing programs that look great on paper but fail at delivery. Leaders who connect data analytics to frontline operations allocate resources more intelligently. Leaders who connect technology to citizen experience build services people can actually use. Another benefit is faster adoption of innovation. Many initiatives fail not because the technology is bad, but because workflows, incentives, capabilities, and culture weren't addressed. Polymathic leaders are more likely to spot those friction points early and manage change as part of the core work, not as an afterthought. Polymathic leadership also supports resilience. In crises like COVID-19, governments that pivoted effectively often had leaders who could synthesize public health knowledge, digital execution, and systems coordination quickly. Where expertise remained locked in silos, responses tended to fragment. And there's the cross-boundary collaboration piece. Modern governance frequently depends on networks, multiple agencies, nonprofits, communities, and private partners. Leaders who can span boundaries and translate between systems are often the difference between a functioning coalition and a group of well-meaning organizations moving in different directions. Citizens feel the difference too. For one, services become more accessible and more equitable when leaders integrate technology choices with equity analysis and real understanding of diverse user needs. A digital service can be technically excellent and still exclude older adults, people with disabilities, or residents with limited digital access. Polymathic leaders are more likely to design for inclusion up front instead of patching inequities later. Communication improves as well. When leaders can explain complex initiatives in plain language, while still being accurate, trust tends to rise. If leaders can only speak in jargon, people disengage. If they oversimplify, credibility drops. The ability to communicate across technical and civic language is a real leadership capability, not just a PR add-on. Stakeholder engagement becomes more meaningful, too. A lot of public consultation fails because the process doesn't connect community input with real constraints and real decision-making. Residents propose ideas that feel obvious to them, technical teams reject them as impossible, policy teams get stuck between competing demands. A polymathic leader can help each group understand the others, turning consultation into co-creation rather than a box-checking exercise. Now, here's the practical question: how do you actually cultivate this kind of leadership in the public sector, especially when civil service systems often reward specialization and predictable career ladders? It starts with recruitment and identification of potential. Instead of hiring only for a narrow credential, agencies can look for learning agility, cognitive flexibility, comfort with ambiguity, and a track record of integrating across domains. In other words, do candidates show real curiosity outside their formal lane? Can they make analogies and transfer lessons from one context to another? Are they willing to say, "I don't know yet, but I can learn"? Do they collaborate well with experts rather than pretending to be the expert? It also helps to create multiple entry pathways. Fellowships and lateral entry programs can bring in designers, data scientists, and technologists who learn public constraints while sharing new methods. Rotation programs can expose early career staff to policy, operations, digital, and engagement work before they lock into a specialty. Some governments do this deliberately. Singapore is often cited for systematic rotations and broad development for emerging leaders. Then comes structured development. Job rotation is one of the strongest tools when it's done seriously, long enough for real competence, with meaningful responsibility, and with reflection so people extract lessons instead of just completing a tour. Stretch assignments also matter. Cross-functional transformation teams where procurement, policy, design, and software have to ship something together. That kind of work forces learning because nobody can succeed alone. Formal education can help too, but it has to be interdisciplinary by design. The goal isn't to create deeper specialists. It's to help leaders connect domains, data with decisions, behavioral insights with program design, systems dynamics with implementation. Programs work best when they mix participants from different backgrounds and focus on synthesis through practical projects. Mentorship is another accelerator. When developing leaders are paired with mentors who model integrative thinking, it speeds up learning. The best mentors don't just give career advice, they introduce networks across domains, help mentees frame problems in broader ways, and give feedback on attempts to bridge disciplines. But individual development isn't enough. Organizations have to make integration easier, not harder. One approach is to make cross-functional teams the default for complex work. If every major initiative requires policy, delivery operations, technology, design, and communications to coordinate, then the structure itself trains people to think integratively. It also reduces the classic throw it over the wall dynamic where one unit designs and another unit struggles to implement. Some agencies use matrix structures, trying to balance functional excellence with mission outcomes. That can work, but only when decision rights are clear, otherwise, matrix becomes a recipe for confusion. Another structural move is to create explicit boundary-spanning roles, people accountable for translation and integration, like chief data officers, chief experience officers, or innovation leaders with authority to convene across departments. Culture is the other half of the equation. Polymathic learning requires psychological safety. If people are punished for not knowing something, they stop asking questions. If leaders feel they must appear certain at all times, they will avoid the learning behaviors that complexity demands. Cultures that support polymathic leadership normalize curiosity, admit gaps without shame, and treat intelligent experimentation differently from careless failure. Time matters too. If every minute is consumed by urgent operational pressures, nobody develops breadth. Agencies that are serious about building integrative capability protect time for learning and cross-domain exploration. They also invest in knowledge infrastructure, not just document storage, but directories of expertise, examples of cross-functional projects, learning libraries that connect methods across domains, and forums where people can ask questions outside their specialty. Partnerships expand capacity as well. Governments don't need to hold all knowledge internally. Universities can provide research muscle and new methods, especially when academics embed in agencies and practitioners shape research questions. Private sector partnerships can help too, if they are structured for knowledge transfer rather than simple outsourcing. Cross-jurisdiction learning networks help leaders see how other cities or countries solved similar problems with different combinations of tools. And community partnerships, including civic tech groups, can bring user perspectives and rapid prototyping approaches into public work. To sustain polymathic capability over time, institutions need learning systems. After-action reviews and project retrospectives capture lessons about where integration worked and where it broke down. Cross-pollination events let teams share real practices, not just polished success stories. Curated learning pathways help staff gain working literacy across multiple domains in a structured way. And deliberate external scanning keeps agencies from getting stuck in yesterday's assumptions. Finally, governance models have to evolve. If an organization is rigidly structured around functions and locked into annual planning cycles with little flexibility, it's hard to respond to complex, emergent problems. Some governments experiment with mission-oriented structures, outcome-based funding, or dual operating systems where agile cross-functional networks work alongside the traditional hierarchy. The key is to keep accountability while enabling adaptation. So, what does all this mean for a public leader listening right now? A few priorities stand out. First, be honest about where your biggest challenges require integration across silos, and where your leadership bench can't currently bridge those gaps. Second, start small but real, pilot rotations, create cross-functional project teams with genuine authority, launch interdisciplinary training cohorts. Third, align incentives. If promotions reward only depth in one function, people will follow that signal. If advancement rewards boundary-spanning outcomes, behaviors change. Fourth, build communities of practice and learning infrastructure so integration becomes normal work, not heroic effort. And fifth, model the behavior personally, ask questions across disciplines, learn in public, and celebrate teams that translate and integrate. There will be resistance. Specialists may worry that breadth dilutes depth. Accountability systems may struggle with shared ownership. Short-term performance pressures will always try to squeeze out learning. But the alternative is worse, sticking with 20th century leadership models while citizen expectations, technology, and societal challenges accelerate into something governments can't keep up with. Polymathic leadership isn't a trendy extra. It's becoming a basic requirement for effective governance. It's how governments can harness digital tools without losing human values, address interconnected challenges without collapsing into fragmentation, and deliver public value with credibility in a low-trust environment. In a world where everything is converging, policy domains, technologies, expectations, risks, the governments that thrive will be the ones led by people who can connect the dots, build coalitions, and keep learning faster than the problems evolve.